You watch speedrunners like Shampy, Dollar, and Mr. Bread, and you think to yourself, I want to run a game like that. You own a PC, keyboard, mouse, no mousepad. Yes! You try to replicate their runs again and again, hundreds of attempts, but it never clicks. Your aim feels wrong, your camera movement feels shaky, everything feels harder than it looks. Eventually you quit, the game sits untouched for weeks, sometimes months. Then one day you're back on YouTube, watching their runs again. And suddenly you're right back at the beginning. But what if the problem was never your execution, but your setup and fundamentals? Like I mentioned in the intro, if you're using a productivity keyboard and mouse with no mousepad, just stop.
Nope.
This is a super common mistake for players trying mouse and keyboard in Hitman for the first time. Yes, technically you can play with these, but reality is, it's not designed for gaming. Productivity keyboards often have higher latency due to the switches not built for fast inputs. Same goes for the mouse. The sensor isn't meant for precise tracking. If I try to play on these devices, look what happens. The mouse sensor can't properly track movement, keyboard input feels slow, and even simple strafe becomes a struggle. And honestly, this is exactly what I did when I first started playing Hitman on mouse and keyboard. If you want to avoid this, there are solid budget options out there. Razer has some decent gear in the $30 to $100 range, like the Black Widow, Cobra, and Gigantus V2 mousepad. Altogether you're looking at around $200 for the full setup. And the difference is night and day. Hitman's extremely low FOV makes everything feel closer than it really is. Even with a sensitivity of around 8 inch per platoon, the game can still feel slow. But in reality, the sensitivity is actually quite fast. This often confuses new Hitman runners. The problem becomes obvious when running through large maps like Sapienza. Crosshair placement becomes messy and camera control feels unstable. When moving through maps, many players rely entirely on wrist movements to make small crouches. This introduces unwanted jitter, resulting in shaky camera movement. To reduce this, try slightly lifting your mouse so the sensor doesn't pick up tiny wrist jitters. Using more arm movement instead of pure wrist control makes camera motion much smoother. If that doesn't help, using arm sleeves helps with smooth mouse control over both wrist and arm movement. The default keybinds are honestly pretty horrible and hard to use. Especially the attack on Q, it's really easy to click it by accident, like when running through the crowds on Freelancer. So I recommend moving the attack to a key far from WASD. Personally, binding attack to T and switching these guys to Q works great and drastically reduces misfires. Next, if you bind inventory to the 5 key, it pairs really well with G. This makes fast interactions access much smoother. For item handling, I suggest binding retreat to Z and drop to X. Since XZ and C are right next to each other, you can roll your fingers across them fast unpacking. On top of that, binding drop to a fifth mouse button makes things even better. This setup is especially useful for Sapienza cliff boosting, where quick drop timing really matters. Let's talk about your monitor, because this is something a lot of players overlook. First, turn overdrive on. If it's off, motion clarity suffers and camera movement feels slower than it should. Next, make sure your refresh rate is set to the maximum, not in your monitor, but in Windows. You'd be surprised how many people complain about FPS or input lag, only to find out later they've been running at 60Hz the whole time. If you want smooth camera movement, this is a must. Set it properly. Hitman Speedrun is extremely reset heavy. You fail, reset, and replay the same sections over and over. That kind of repetition takes a lot out of you faster than you realize. That's why short focused practice sessions work better than long grinds. Instead of playing for hours, record your runs. Use OBS, not GeForce Experience. GeForce Experience adds extra latency and just isn't ideal for this kind of practice. Record at low quality, keep disk usage low, and if possible, add a handcam or normal plugin to capture your mouse movement. Record a few runs, then stop. Come back next day with a fresh mind and review the footage. Bad habits, wasted motion, and shaky camera movement stand out immediately. Guitar players grind shreds without thinking. Speedrunners grind full game rounds at full boost. We're not that gifted, and pretending we are gets us nowhere. So don't practice a game. Identify your weaknesses, set targets, and train with purpose.